In the universe of Game of Thrones, the character Cersei Lannister stands out as one of the most complex and tragic figures, shaped by a constant tension between power, maternal instinct, paranoia, and a deeply rooted survival instinct. From the very beginning, her personality is formed under the influence of a ruthless, strategic, and authoritarian father figure like Tywin Lannister, while also internalizing the Lannister family philosophy that power is everything, which transforms her worldview from one based on love into one centered on control and security. One of the most defining elements of Cersei's life is her intense, forbidden, and emotionally dependent relationship with her twin brother Jaime Lannister, a bond that becomes both her greatest emotional vulnerability and her strongest source of power, shaping many of her decisions through love, jealousy, and possessiveness. In the early stages of the story, her forced marriage to Robert Baratheon creates a deep psychological fracture within her, as she experiences it both as a political necessity and a personal humiliation, gradually destroying her sense of trust and pushing her toward an increasingly controlling, suspicious, and ruthless personality. Over time, Cersei learns to suppress emotional vulnerability completely in order to survive within Westeros' patriarchal system, viewing power as the only safe space, and thus reducing all relationships to strategic instruments. However, her motherhood becomes both her most human trait and one of her most destructive motivations, as her attachment to her children Joffrey Baratheon, Tommen Baratheon, and Myrcella Baratheon defines nearly all her political decisions, making the protection of her children synonymous with the pursuit of power itself. Yet this extreme protectiveness evolves into paranoia over time, creating a psychological loop where perceived threats continuously expand and blur the line between reality and fear. The period of the High Sparrow Uprising becomes one of the most critical turning points in her life, as humiliation, imprisonment, and public shame reshape her entirely, fueling a relentless desire for revenge. From that point onward, Cersei ceases to be merely a queen and instead becomes a destructive force against the system itself, abandoning moral boundaries in her pursuit of absolute control. Nevertheless, her character cannot simply be reduced to that of a villain, because every decision she makes is deeply rooted in fear, loss, and the trauma of losing control, which ultimately makes her a profoundly tragic figure. Even at the height of her power, her internal unrest never disappears but instead intensifies, as every victory isolates her further and increases her sense of loneliness. In the end, Cersei's story becomes a narrative of collapse, illustrating how the pursuit of power at any cost leads both to ultimate authority and inevitable isolation, making her one of the most powerful yet tragic female figures in Westeros, a psychological portrait constantly suspended between love, fear, ambition, and destruction.